Deep in the humid, mosquito-infested heart of the Florida Everglades, something is moving through the sawgrass that shouldn't be there. It's a silent, camouflaged shadow, a muscular tube of pure predatory power that didn't exist in this ecosystem 40 years ago. We are talking about the Burmese python, an invasive titan that has turned one of America's most unique national parks into a private buffet. For years, professional hunters and state-sanctioned contractors have been patrolling the levees and swamps, trying to stem the tide of these serpentine invaders. But recently, a team of seasoned python hunters tracked a signal that led them to a monster. They caught the largest Burmese python ever recorded in Florida history, a record-shattering female that looked more like a fallen tree trunk than a living animal. But as incredible as her size was, the real shock came when researchers brought her back to the lab for a necropsy. When they opened her up to see how she had become so massive, they found something inside her that wasn't just a meal. They found a biological treasure chest and a terrifying preview of the future of the Everglades that has left the scientific community absolutely stunned. To understand why this catch is a global headline, you have to realize the scale of the war currently being fought in Florida. The Everglades is a river of grass, a delicate balance of water, birds, gators, and mammals. But since the 1990s, Burmese pythons, originally brought over as exotic pets, have escaped or been released into the wild. With no natural predators and an endless supply of food, they have exploded in number. They are the perfect invasive species. They can swim for miles, they can climb trees, and they can go months without eating. But when they do eat, they consume everything. Scientists have noted a 99% decrease in sightings of small mammals like raccoons, possums, and rabbits in certain areas of the park. The pythons are literally eating the Everglades hollow. The record-breaking python was found in the Big Cypress National Preserve. The hunters, working with the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, weren't just lucky. They were using a high-tech scout method. They caught a smaller male python, fitted him with a GPS radio transmitter, and nicknamed him Dionysus. During the breeding season, males like Dionysus seek out the biggest, most productive females. By following his signal, the team was led straight to the queen of the swamp. When they finally spotted her, they couldn't believe their eyes. She was 18 feet long and weighed an incredible 215 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's as much as a heavyweight boxer, but stretched out into nearly 20 feet of pure muscle. Catching her was a physical battle that required several grown men just to pin her down. But the real mystery began back at the research facility. When the biologists started the necropsy, they expected to find the remains of a deer or maybe a large alligator. Pythons are famous for their ability to unhinge their jaws and swallow prey much wider than their own bodies. But as they carefully opened the digestive tract, they found a record-breaking haul of a different kind. Inside this single female were 122 developing eggs. This was the largest clutch ever found in a Florida python. It was a biological bomb. If she hadn't been caught, those 122 hatchlings would have been released into the swamp, each one capable of growing into another monster. It was a speechless moment for the researchers, realizing just how fast these animals are reproducing and how much pressure they are putting on the environment. But wait, there was more. Deep within her stomach, they found the remains of her last meal. It wasn't just a single animal. They found the hoof cores of an entire adult white-tailed deer. Now, we've known for a while that pythons can eat deer, but seeing the physical evidence inside an 18-foot snake is a different reality. But as they sifted through the stomach contents, they found something even more surprising. They found the remains of multiple different species, all eaten in a relatively short period. There were bits of fur from a marsh rabbit, feathers from a large wading bird, and scales from a native snake. This python wasn't just a hunter. She was a vacuum cleaner of the Everglades. She was consuming the entire spectrum of the food chain, from the smallest mammals to the largest herbivores. This discovery has led to a major shift in how Florida manages the python crisis. It proved that the scout snake method is the most effective way to find the large, reproductive females that are driving the population boom. But it also raised a scary question. If this 18-foot snake was found, how many 20-footers are hiding in the vast, inaccessible reaches of the swamp? The Everglades is millions of acres of dense vegetation. We are only seeing the tip of the iceberg. The record-breaking python is a window into a hidden world where these predators are growing larger and more dominant every year. Scientists are now looking at the genetics of these massive snakes. They found that the Florida pythons are starting to show signs of hybrid vigor. Some of the snakes being caught are a cross between the Burmese python and the Indian rock python. Indian rock pythons are known for being more aggressive and better adapted to slightly drier areas. This hybridization could be creating a super snake that is even more resilient and dangerous to the local wildlife. The 18-foot record holder is a prime example of how these genetic lines are flourishing in the unique Florida climate. But the most fascinating research coming out of this catch involves the bone-eating chemistry of the python. Inside the snake's stomach, researchers found that the deer hooves were being dissolved at an incredible rate. A python's stomach acid is some of the most powerful in the animal kingdom. When they swallow a large meal, their internal organs, including their heart and liver, actually grow in size to handle the massive influx of nutrients and the intense metabolic demand of digestion. Within 48 hours of eating a deer, the python's heart can increase in mass by 40%. Once the meal is digested, the organs shrink back to their original size. This biological elasticity is something NASA and medical researchers are studying to understand how we might help humans with heart disease or organ failure. The python is a living laboratory of physiological transformation. However, the shock for the public came when the hunters shared the footage of the capture. In the video, you can see the sheer power of the animal as it tries to wrap itself around the hunters. A snake of that size doesn't just bite. It constricts with thousands of pounds of pressure. It's a primal, terrifying force. The reality that these monsters are living just a few miles from suburban neighborhoods in South Florida has created a sense of urgency. The python isn't just a cool nature story anymore. It's a direct threat to the natural heritage of the state. The 122 eggs discovery also highlighted the massive resource gap in the fight against the pythons. Currently, there are only a few dozen professional hunters and a handful of dedicated researchers covering an area the size of a small country. Each female python caught is a victory, but with hundreds of thousands estimated to be in the wild, the math is daunting. The record-breaking catch has been a call to action, leading to increased funding for drone technology and infrared sensors that can spot the heat signatures of the snakes through the thick canopy. But there is a new mystery that has hunters baffled. As they track more scout snakes, they are finding that the pythons are moving into marine environments. They've been spotted miles out at sea and on the remote islands of the Florida Keys. The pythons are adapting to salt water, which expands their potential range to the entire Caribbean and up the Atlantic coast. The discovery of a massive female with a stomach full of diverse prey proves that they don't need a specific habitat to thrive. As long as there is something to eat, they will find a way to survive. One of the most speech-defying moments for the necropsy team was finding microplastics in the digestive tract of the python. Even in the middle of the remote Everglades, inside a predator that lives in the mud and the grass, the evidence of human pollution was present. The plastics likely came from the smaller animals the python had eaten, showing how pollution travels up the food chain until it reaches the apex. It was a reminder that even the most wild and alien parts of our planet are connected to our daily habits. The hunters who caught the 18-footer described the experience as humbling. They've spent their lives in the swamp, but they had never seen anything that moved with that kind of authority. They described the snake as having a heavy presence, like an ancient dinosaur. When you are standing in the dark, waist deep in water, and you realize you are looking at something that could easily pull you under, your perspective on nature changes. You realize that the Everglades is currently a no-man's land, where the rules of the American wilderness are being rewritten by a visitor from Southeast Asia. NASA researchers are also interested in the skin of the python. The scales are incredibly durable but also flexible. They are exploring how the structure of python skin could be used to create better materials for spacesuits or flexible shielding for rovers. The record-breaking female provided a massive sample of this high-performance biological armor. It turns out that the snake we are trying to remove from the ecosystem might actually hold the keys to some of our future technologies. But why did the something inside part shock the country so much? Because it was a physical manifestation of the loss. When people saw the 122 eggs laid out on a table, they didn't just see snake eggs. They saw 122 future hunters that would have eaten thousands of native animals. They saw the displacement of the Florida panther and the disappearance of the wood stork. It turned the abstract concept of invasive species into something tangible and horrifying. It made people realize that the Everglades is in a fight for its life. The catch also boosted the popularity of the Python Challenge, an annual event where amateurs and professionals compete to catch the most and the largest snakes. While controversial to some, The event brings massive awareness to the issue. The 18-foot female has become the poster child for the challenge, showing what's possible if you're brave enough to look in the right places. It has turned python hunting into a strange kind of modern-day folk heroism in Florida. As the team continued to analyze the big female, they found that she was surprisingly old. Based on the growth rings in her bone tissue, they estimated she was at least 20 years old. This means she was one of the pioneers, likely one of the first generation of pythons to be born in the wild after the initial escapes. She had survived for 2 decades, dodging hunters, avoiding alligators, and growing larger with every meal. She was a survivor, a testament to the incredible resilience of her species. It made researchers realize that the pythons aren't just a passing fad in the ecosystem. They are settling in for the long haul. Another shocking find was the presence of a specific type of lung parasite inside the snake. These parasites were originally from Asia but have now jumped to native Florida snakes. The pythons are acting as biological Trojan horses, bringing in diseases and parasites that the local snakes have no immunity against. Catching the big female allowed scientists to study how these parasites are spreading and what impact they are having on the native water snakes and racers. It's a war on multiple fronts. The snakes are eating the mammals, and their parasites are attacking the other reptiles. Wait, there's an even more bizarre detail. In the area where the big female was caught, the hunters found a nesting colony of several other large pythons. It appears that the large females are creating hubs in the swamp, and the males are traveling for miles to reach them. These hubs are becoming the factories of the invasion. By discovering the locations of these hotspots, the state can now target its efforts more effectively. Instead of wandering aimlessly, they can focus on the source points of the population. The record-breaking catch has also sparked a debate about predator balance. Some people have suggested bringing in king cobras or other larger predators to eat the pythons. But as history has shown with the introduction of the cane toad in Australia or the mongoose in Hawaii, bringing in a second invasive species to fight the first usually leads to a double disaster. The only natural predator in Florida that can take on a large python is a full-grown American alligator. There have been epic battles filmed between the two, but an 18-foot snake is a match for almost any gator. We are watching a clash of the titans in slow motion, where the ancient king of the swamp, the alligator, is being challenged for its throne. One of the most speechless moments for the hunters was the silence of the area where the big snake was found. Usually the Everglades is a cacophony of frogs, insects, and birds, but around the territory of the 18-foot female, it was eerily quiet. It's as if the entire local ecosystem had learned to hold its breath, or had been simply consumed. This dead zone effect is a chilling indicator of what a python-dominated future looks like. A quiet swamp is a dying swamp. The scientific community is also using the data from the big female to create predictive models for where the pythons will go next. With climate change making the northern parts of Florida warmer, there is nothing stopping these snakes from moving into Georgia, Alabama, and beyond. The biggest python ever isn't a trophy, it's a warning. It's proof that we have created a habitat where these animals can grow to their maximum biological potential, far exceeding the sizes they typically reach in their native range in Asia. The something inside the python also included a collection of otoliths, which are the ear bones of fish. This proved that the python was even eating fish, likely lunging at them from the water's edge. This expands the menu even further. There is practically nothing in the Florida wilderness that is safe from these snakes. From the smallest minnow to the largest deer, the python is a universal consumer. This level of dietary flexibility is why they are so hard to beat. You can't starve them out by protecting one specific species. The catch also highlighted the incredible stealth of these animals. Despite being 18 feet long and weighing 200 pounds, the snake was practically invisible in the grass until the hunters were just a few feet away. Their pattern is a perfect match for the play of light and shadow in the sawgrass. This invisible giant factor is why the population grew so large before we even realized there was a problem. They were hiding in plain sight for decades. As the news of the biggest one ever spread, it inspired a new generation of citizen scientists. People are now using an app called I've Got One to report python sightings in real time. This swarm of data is helping professional teams respond faster. The 18-foot snake has become a symbol of why, if you see something, say something is so important in conservation. The fight for the Everglades has become a crowdsourced war. But let's talk about the physical toll on the hunters. Dealing with a 200-pound snake in 90-degree heat and 100% humidity is brutal. The hunters described the smell of the big snake as a mix of stagnant water and old leather. The physical exertion of the capture took hours, and the adrenaline dump afterward left them shaking. It's not a hobby for the faint of heart. It's a grueling, dangerous job that requires a deep passion for the Florida wilderness. The 122 eggs were eventually used for a variety of research projects, including heat tolerance testing and embryonic development studies. Scientists are trying to find a weak point in the python's life cycle. If they can find a way to disrupt the way the eggs hatch or how the hatchlings find food, they might be able to crash the population without having to catch every single snake. The big female provided the raw material for this vital research. She might have been a monster, but in her destruction, she provided the tools for her own species' potential downfall. One of the most interesting recent discoveries is that some native Florida birds are starting to change their behavior to avoid pythons. They are nesting higher in the trees or in more exposed areas where they can see the snakes coming. It's a desperate race of evolutionary adaptation. Can the native animals learn to live with the dragon in their backyard fast enough to survive? The data from the necropsy of the 18-footer shows that the birds are currently losing the race. But there is hope that over generations, the smartest animals will survive and pass on their python awareness to their offspring. The biggest python ever catch also had an impact on the pet trade laws. It led to stricter regulations and a total ban on the ownership of Burmese pythons in Florida. The state is trying to close the barn door after the horse has already bolted, but it's a necessary step to prevent the introduction of new genetic lines. The sight of that 18-foot monster was enough to convince even the most skeptical politicians that exotic pets can have world-changing consequences. The story of the Florida python hunters is a story of human intervention in its most raw form. We caused the problem, and now we are literally wrestling with it. It's a messy, difficult, and sometimes speechless process. But for the researchers at the Conservancy of Southwest Florida, every big snake they remove is a gift back to the ecosystem. It's a few dozen deer that won't be eaten, a few hundred eggs that won't hatch, and a chance for the Everglades to breathe. As the sun sets over the river of grass, the hunters are back out on the levees. They are looking for the next signal, the next Dionysus that will lead them to the next queen. They know that the record they set with the 18-footer won't last forever. Somewhere out there is a 19-footer, or maybe a 20-footer, coiled in the dark, waiting. The war for the swamp continues, one catch at a time. The shocker inside the snake was more than just eggs and deer bones. It was a mirror. It showed us what happens when we disturb the balance of nature. It showed us the power of an invader and the fragility of a native paradise. But it also showed us the dedication of the people who are willing to go into the mud and the dark to fix it. The biggest python ever caught is a trophy of resilience, bravery, and the unrelenting pursuit of scientific truth in the wildest corners of Florida. The memory of that 18-foot beast remains a powerful reminder of the work that still needs to be done. We can't just walk away from the Everglades. We are the caretakers of this unique world, and the pythons are our responsibility. As long as there are hunters willing to wade into the swamp, and scientists willing to sift through the shocks inside the stomach, there is hope for the birds, the gators, and the sawgrass. The dragon has been found, but the battle is far from over. So, the next time you think about the Everglades, don't just think of a pretty park. Think of the queen of the swamp, the 18-foot giant that held 122 futures inside her. Think of the men who caught her and the secrets she revealed. Nature is full of surprises, and sometimes the biggest ones are the ones we brought there ourselves. Stay curious, stay informed, and always respect the wild, because you never know what's hiding right beneath the surface of the grass. The python hunters of Florida are on the case, and the world is watching, waiting to see what shocks the next necropsy will reveal. The records will be broken, the science will advance, and the Everglades will continue to be the front line in one of the world's most incredible biological dramas. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of the Florida Python War. Keep your eyes open and your spirit wild. The next big catch is just around the corner.